What is up, everybody? So you want to learn how to play the bass guitar. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second, but to give you a starter, let me just explain something that is very important. There are people that play the bass, and then there are people who are bass players. Okay? Those two things are very different, right? Now, I personally am somebody who plays the bass. I'm not a bass player, but I can give you the foundations of what you will need to know in order to become a wonderful bass player. Now, what I mean by that is you might see over here this lovely guitar. Now, that guitar has some of the same strings and some of the same notes as the bass, just an octave up. If you don't know what an octave is, don't worry about it. We're going to get into that. Okay? Now, the bass, as you may have noticed, only has 4 strings, whereas the guitar has 6. But the notes of the bottom 4 strings of the guitar are the same with the bass. Now, you might be looking at your bass and you might be thinking, wait a minute, mine has 5 strings. What do I do with that? We'll get into that as well. But for right now, what we're going to focus on is a 4-string bass. And if you have a 5th string, you're just going to ignore the one that sits closest to your chin. Okay? And we're going to work on the 4 under here. And I'm going to teach you how to figure out what those notes are on the lower string later. All right? But to begin with, we're going to start with the different parts of the bass. We're going to talk about the amp a little bit. We're going to talk about tuning, and we're going to get all set up on how to play. I always tell my students, you know the difference between a professional bass player and somebody who has no idea what they're doing, and it's that their bass is in tune. If you can get your bass in tune, then you have to start with that in order to actually be able to play the instrument. So let's go over the basic parts of this instrument, and we will talk about how to tune it up, how to get it all set up so that you're making sound. Because if you just start strumming these things, you probably won't be able to hear very much except for maybe the high string without it plugged into an amp, and we're going to get into that in just a second. Okay, so here are the different parts of your bass guitar. Okay, now this big part right here, this is called the body of the bass. Okay, usually made out of wood. And then these black things in here, those are the pickups. Now, basically what that is an electromagnet that picks up the vibration of the strings and translates it into a signal that comes out of this right here, which is a 1/4 inch jack. And that is where you plug in your cable to go to your amp, and therefore it makes sounds. Now, right here we've got 2 different dials. One of these is a volume knob, and one of these is a tone knob. Okay, and the volume, of course, is like how much loud is it, right? And the tone, that's really important because it can change the flavor of the bass. It can make it go from that slappy bam, bam, bam type of bass sound to maybe more of a mellow boom ba 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 type of sound. Okay? All right, so body, pickups, you've got your different switches here, your different knobs to control volume and tone. You've got your input jack. Okay, this right here, this section right here at the very bottom where your strings are attached at the bass is called the bridge. Okay, that's the bridge of the bass, and you can do some fine adjustments to the bridge to help get the strings to be extra in tune, but we won't get into that right now. Okay, of course you have your strings. The strings are pretty thick. They're kind of like piano strings. This right here is called the neck of the bass. The neck of the instrument, and the little metal strips on the neck are called frets. Now, if you imagine that you've pulled a rubber band really tight and you plucked it, it would make a sound kind of like ba, right? But if you pinched that rubber band in the middle, I don't know if you can hear that or not. I'll try to turn up the volume. It can change the pitch from low to a low tone to a high tone, ba, ba, bee, ba, 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 depending on where you grab it. And the closer you are to over here, the higher the pitch is going to be. And as you move backwards in pitch, if you're pinching it, right? I'm pinching it with my fingernails to make it do all that. It's going to make a lower pitch. Now, instead of pinching each string, what we can do is we can press down on each string and change the notes. Okay, so each fret represents a different note that you can play, and then of course each string represents a different tone, a high tone or a low tone that you can play on those particular notes, and they're mathematically spaced out so that you're going to be making sure that if you are in tune, you're actually going to be playing a note. Speaking of tuning, these at the very top right here, these are called your tuning pegs, all right, and these are called your tuners, right? Now, when it comes to tuning the bass, we're going to change the camera up just a little bit, and what I've got right here, there's a couple different ways to tune, all right? If we get all plugged into the amp and all you have is a cell phone, there are plenty of apps out there for free where it can listen to the notes that's coming through, and then it can tell you if you're in tune or not, or to go sharp or flat. And I'm going to explain how to do that here in just a second. I will say that with the bass, because it's such a low tone, those apps work really good on guitars, but sometimes they're not so dependable on the bass. And so what I would recommend is either get a pedal tuner where you're going to plug into your 1/4-inch jack into a pedal that you can step on, and it will help you find whether or not you're in tune, and then out of that pedal you go into the amp. Or you can get one of these, which is a little tuner. This one's by Snark, and these are cheap on Amazon. And basically what they do is they feel the vibrations of the string through the headstock. This is called the headstock of the bass. And they'll pick up the vibrations, and they'll tell you if you're in tune or not, or if you need to go sharp or flat. Okay, so quick review, and then we'll get into tuning. Okay, we got the body, pickups. We've got volume knob, tone knob, input jack or output jack, bridge, neck, fretboard, okay, strings, headstock, tuning pegs, and tuners, okay? And then we've got our actual tuner thing, okay? All right, I'm going to change the camera and I'll show you how to tune your bass. Okay, so I'm going to see if you can see this and I can see it at the same time. Right now the tuner is still kind of going, it's listening for everything. I'm going to play the bottom string, the fattest string on here, and we're going to see what comes up on the tuner. Okay, now you'll notice that it says E right here. Okay, that is the name of this note that is played on the lowest string. But on this side, everything is red. And so what we're going to do is with our thumb pointed towards us, we're going to start turning this tuner peg away from us to make the pitch go up. Okay, so if you turn away from yourself, the pitch will go up. If you turn towards yourself, then the pitch will go down. Okay, so it doesn't take much. All right, so make sure it's running E again. Now it's reading B. All right, there's E. I'm going to slowly go up. Notice how little I'm moving it. All right, right when it says that blue line right there, then that's how I know that I'm in tune. Okay, we're going to go to the next note, which is A. Same issue, I'm beneath it. Now, what about if I'm way above it? Okay, like that. You see how it turns yellow there? That means I'm above the note. Okay, and I need to come back. Now I will say, as you're tuning, it's usually easier to start below and work your way up than it is to start above the pitch and work your way down. Okay, so you want to start low and work your way up. Okay, so we've got our A is in tune. So we've got E, A, the next one is D, and it's already in tune. Happy day. Okay, and the last one is G. Needs to come up. Alright, and as soon as it's up, then we're in tune. We can turn our tuner off. I recommend turning your tuner off if you've got one of these little clip-on things, just because it'll run the battery out, and that's annoying. Alright, so you've got your amp plugged into power. You've got your bass tuned. Oh, this thing's heavy. Okay, I'm going to show you a little bit of how to run your amp here. I'm going to unplug it so I can actually pick it up here. Alright. On the top of your amp here, there's going to be an input, okay? That's where you're going to go in. Right here I've got a power button. You're going to have some type of power. And the other things that you might have on your amp, they're going to say like low, medium, and high. Or they may say bass and treble and mid or something like that. For right now, Just take all of those and put them right at 12 o'clock. And then you can dial in your tone as you kind of learn a little bit more about that. The other thing that you might have is you might have a gain knob and a volume knob. Okay, in my case, they're one and the same right here. Just make it so that you can practice in your room or whatever without necessarily like waking up the neighbors or anything like that. So you want to be able to practice as much as possible and as often as possible without disturbing a bunch of other people. So figure out the good volume, put these at 12 o'clock for right now, and then as you determine what the sound you really want is, or if you're trying to match the sound of a recording, then you can get into the fancier stuff later. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is take a 1/4-inch cable like this and plug it into the input. Make sure we're plugged into power, and plug in the other end into our bass guitar, and we're ready to rock and roll. Alright, so now we have the bass plugged in. As you can hear, it's making sounds now. Alright, that's because we've got it plugged into the amp. On its own, it doesn't make much sound. Of course, I've got my volume all the way up. I've got the tone knob all the way to the front. And you can experiment with that tone knob about like how it changes things. See, that's a little bit more mellow. And then this is a little bit more slappy. So anyways, do what you want there with the tone knob, but for now we're going to get into how to hold the bass and how to play. Alright, now when you're sitting down, it's got a little cutout here where it can rest on your leg or on your other leg depending on how you like to play. When you have a strap, you want to make sure that if it's super low, it's going to be hard for you to wrap your hand around to actually play some of the notes. So, but then again, maybe you don't want to be like the Beatles and have it way up here. Wherever's comfortable for you, but you want to make sure that wherever you are on the fretboard, you can play comfortably. Now, for teaching you, I'm going to be sitting down because this is going to take a while, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and remain seated and keep working on it from this way. Now, the other things that you need to know are these two fingers are kind of your lead fingers when it comes to playing the bass. Now, we're not going to get into any slap bass or anything like that where you're doing fancy stuff. You're mostly going to be using these two fingers. Now, if you talk to somebody who is who plays the bass, they're not going to tell you which finger to use. And so a lot of them end up using one finger, or they'll even use a guitar pick. I love using a guitar pick when playing the bass. If you're coming from guitar to the bass, you may want to do that. It works really great for up-tempo, really fast stuff and running riffs, but you can also get a lot of mobility and diversity by using two fingers. Now, what you're supposed to do is your middle finger, finger number 2, is supposed to be the lead finger that you actually played the bass with. So if you're walking the bass, let's play an open E string, all right, the very bottom one, the one that's closest to your chin, okay, so bottom in tone, top in regards to vertically, right, that's the E. If we're going to play like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 1 is supposed to be your middle finger. All right, is that going to like make or break you if you play 1, 2, 3, 4? Probably not. But there are lots of songs where you need that walking pattern. And so your rhythm between these two fingers needs to be good. That's really what I care about. I, for the most part, am going to try to start with my middle finger as I play, just because that is what you're supposed to do. A lot of the times what you'll see is when people are beginners playing bass, either their hands will go straight up and down like this, or they'll rock them forward so that they can look down and see the string. And so you may have noticed as you played that, you went like this, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's kind of difficult because your middle finger is much longer than your pointer finger. So what do we do about that? Well, the trick is to rotate your hand this way. And the best way to do that is to find yourself an anchor point. Now, when I'm playing, my anchor point is usually this pick guard right here. I have one screw removed so it kind of pops up a little bit and I can rest my thumb there, and this is just where it's comfortable for me to play. All right, and it helps me to angle my fingers forward just a little bit so that my middle finger and my pointer finger are closer to the same height when it comes to touching the fretboard. Okay, now a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll find the pickup in the very back right here, and they'll put their thumb on top of the pickup. My pickups are kind of shallow and they sit awful close to that last string, so it's not as comfortable, and so I like to sit it on top of the pick guard. You could also use the very front of your neck here, but once you get into playing up high, that may be uncomfortable. Old basses back in the 70s, they would even have a little plastic bar that would go right here that were particularly meant to put your thumb on top of. So all that to say, find some place to anchor your thumb, rock your hand forward just a little bit, and make sure you can play all of the strings. Okay, all right, great. So that's how you play. The other thing to make sure is when you're actually fretting notes on this side, what you want to make sure that you do is, as much as you can, in the bass, it's not as if I'm teaching guitar, I'm telling kids to make like a bridge with their fingers and not to touch other strings, because you want all of the strings to ring through. In the bass, you actually kind of want to mute everything except for the one thing that you're playing for the most part. Okay, and so you can press with the middle, like the pad of your finger, the middle of your finger. That's a decent way to get some good tone out of the bass. You can also use what would be considered like the tip of your finger. Like if your fingernails are cut enough that you can press down. I've got calluses on the tips of my finger from playing guitar, and so a lot of the times I'm going to be playing with that part just because I'm used to pressing down like that. The other thing to keep in mind is that as you're playing, if you press, one of the things that is annoying is if you get that buzzy, rattly sound. You hear that? Now what's happening there is I intentionally, to show you this, when I'm pressing down, right now I'm pressing on the 3rd fret of the E string, so that's a G note right there, which is going to be the first dot on most of your basses out there. But when it comes to that rubber band thing, right, I'm not near the front of the fret, meaning the front closest to the bridge. If I get as far away from the bridge as possible and press down, then I'm going to get a buzz. Hear that buzz? Okay, if I press in the middle of the fret, it's a little cleaner. And if I press right close to the front of the fret, completely clean. Okay, so you can land in the middle of the fret, you're going to have to press harder to keep that tone clean. And if you're in the back of the fret, and if you're not pressing hard, you're going to start to get that buzz sound. Okay, usually that buzz means that your finger's just not right on the fret, or you're not pressing hard enough. Okay, all right, let's get into playing some music.